Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Rachel Rose Jackson from the Global Campaign to Kick Big Polluters Out, a global coalition of more than 450 organizations from around the world, collectively representing millions of people, united in demanding an end to the ability of big polluters to write the rules of climate action, an end to the ability of big polluters to fund genocide, and that it's time to kick big polluters out. This is a cross-constituency press conference that's co-hosted by Youngo, the youth constituency, Women and Gender constituency, Climate Action Network, and the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice. I'm going to introduce our speakers in just a moment, but just to say, to get all speaker information, affiliations, and more information about the research on fossil fuel lobbyists at COP that Kick Big Polluters Out as a collective has launched today, please go to kickbigpollutersout.org and click on the Weed Out the Snakes button for all of this information. With me today, we have Ned Tuganay from Cordillera People's Alliance in the Philippines, Pat Boland from the Women and Gender constituency, Patience Nabukalu from Stop ECOP and Fridays for Future Uganda, and Mohammed Uzraf from the Palestinian Youth Climate Negotiations Team. Year after year, we come to these halls of supposed climate action, and this is what we hear. We hear silence. We hear silence when for 30 COPs, we fly from all around the world to demand justice, and we only get empty promises, greenwash, and useless words with no action. We hear silence when we watch oil and gas executives sign the dotted line on more than $250 billion in oil and gas expenditure since COP28 last year, according to new research by Oil Change International. We hear silence while we watch global north governments spend trillions on war machines that fuel violence around the world and come here to hear that there are $0 to pay their climate debt for fueling the climate crisis. And we hear silence when that war machine, also enabled directly by the fossil fuel industry, directly fuels and enables genocide of the people of Palestine, Sudan, indigenous peoples around the world, and all around the world. These are not the halls of justice. These are the halls of silence. But we, the members of the Global Campaign to Kick Big Polluters Out, we will not be silent. We know why this COP fails. It fails because these walls were built not by the people, but for, by, and because of big polluters and the global north governments who have caused this crisis. But we will not accept another failure. This morning, the Global Campaign to Kick Big Polluters Out released research that exposed that there are 1,770 fossil fuel lobbyists roaming these calls at the UN climate talks in Baku. That's more than almost any other country apart from this year's host, next year's host, and Turkey. And it's more than all of the delegates from the 10 most climate vulnerable nations combined. These lobbyists, they're not here for justice. They're not here for action. These lobbyists are snakes slithering around these halls, poisoning climate action and condemning millions of people around the world to their deaths and planet to destruction. I'm joined today by members of the Global Campaign to Kick Big Polluters Out and our fellow constituency allies and friends. First, we're going to have Ned Tuganay from Cordillera People's Alliance Philippines share some of your thoughts. Ned, over to you.
Hi, again, thank you for having me here. This is more of a reaction to what the Kick Big Polluters Out has revealed on the presence of fuel lobbyists here at COP29. But before that, I would just like to introduce myself. I am an indigenous youth, an Igorot indigenous youth from the Cordillera, Philippines. And I am here more for out of necessity because we are experiencing a lot of issues concerning our ancestral lands. We have seen a sudden rise of renewable energy projects and large-scale mining projects being implemented. And with this implementation, it entails the stealing and grabbing of our ancestral lands. So in order to survive and in order to fight back, we thought that we could go to this space and have our voices be heard. But so far in our experiences, we do have a space, but we feel like this is an illusion, and it is a space to keep us in a box and to keep us quiet. And it is enraging to hear that there is almost 2,000 of fuel lobbyists engaging in this space, taking more spaces than the peoples who should be at the front lines discussing what should be in salient climate texts. I have learned from the research that Japan, for instance, has brought Sumitomo here, and the United Kingdom has brought a significant number of fossil fuel lobbyists. And these countries have mining projects that are to be implemented in our indigenous ancestral lands. So this also tells us what to expect at the COP29. And we expect that more people will be coming to speak out, and more of us, indigenous youth from our indigenous communities, no matter how far we are, we will be taking up space and speaking out what we need to do for our ancestral lands and for our right to self-determination. So while we're still navigating the entire climate process, the entire climate negotiations, and we have to admit that we have been feeling so small so far, and we have been feeling so disconnected, and yet we have the stories. We are experiencing what you are talking about, the climate crisis, and we are wondering why at the COP29, it is not a space for us. We are the people being affected. And so when we see that we have few fossil fuel lobbyists here, it is a very demoralizing, what do you call this? It's a very demoralizing thing to learn. But at the same time, it gives us the motivation to continue fighting and to continue speaking out. So for now, that is what I have to say, and I would also like to express my solidarity to every marginalized groups who are here today and who are calling out these big polluters, calling for them to be kicked out of these spaces and calling for the people to be in. And I expect and I also hope that in the next climate negotiations, we will have bigger and more powerful delegations from indigenous youth who are fighting for their ancestral lands, and for them to be able to speak out their climate actions on the ground, and for them to see what is actually happening in the climate negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Also, I should mention Ned is speaking on behalf or as a member of the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice. Next, we'll hear from our colleague from the Women and Gender constituency, Pat Boland.
Thank you, Rachel. The number released by the Kick Big Polluters Out campaign revealed that at least 1,773 fossil fuel lobbyists have made it into these rooms. Compare this number to the number to our constituency, the Observer Group for Women and Gender, which has registered individuals of feminist organizations, LGBTIQ organizations, grassroots researchers, and activists. The delegations making up our group account for only 180 participants. So basically, this means that we are outnumbered 10 times by fossil fuel lobbyists. And it truly leaves me speechless. We are here to advocate for a basic human right, gender equality. And this means climate justice. And that said, it is demoralizing, but also motivating, but it also shows that we do urgently need a conflict of interest policy in this space. We can no longer pretend that these numbers will not make these negotiations fail in reaching the 1.5-degree target. It does not come by surprise that this process keeps promoting market-based solutions that preserve business as usual. We can watch live in these rooms that they are unable to learn from past mistakes that we have found by the Kyoto Protocol market mechanisms. They have already failed. They enable too slow progress for a gender transformative and sustainable future. Fossil fuel industries have largely contributed to climate change. And this is hitting groups that face discrimination much harder in all spheres of lives. Women and gender-expansive folks bear the brunt in situations of extreme climate events. Not only do they face the loss of their livelihood and lives, they also face further discriminations and threats of their lives in after disaster situations, plus an immense increase of care work. Then they also have to fight for land and rights when facing further expansion of oil, gas, coal, and mining activities. Various research and experiences from the ground show that when exploitative fossil industries are introduced or expanded in a region, this causes a significant increase of sexual and domestic violence, including femicides. In addition, gendered health impacts are enormous. In areas of extraction and oil drilling, women have a 150% higher chance of cancer, including breast and uterus cancer. These numbers are from Ecuador. Criminalization of women defenders who have organized to oppose these activities receive physical, verbal, and psychological aggressions from public forces as much as mining groups, plus threats of their lives, threats of their body integrity, and of course, murder. But if we collectively fight for environmental justice and gender equality, then we can shut down fossil fuels. This has happened in different parts of the world. In Germany, as much as for Yasun National Park in Ecuador. It's time to weed out the snakes. This means no more writing the rules to prevent climate action, reset the system, polluters out, women and LGBTIQ plus persons in, and feminist climate justice now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, for those words. Next, we're going to hear from Patience Nabukalu from Stop ECOP and Fridays for Future Uganda. Patience.
Thank you for being here today. I'm here as a youth representative, a climate activist, and a voice for the future being shaped right now in the rooms and corridors of COP29. But sadly, the very space designed to tackle climate change are the ones being corrupted by fossil fuel lobbyists. The influence of the fossil fuel industry has polluted COP processes year after year. We saw it at COP27. We saw it again at COP28. And here we are at COP29, with fossil fuel lobbyists again allowed access, while youth and vulnerable communities are pushed to the margins. To keep global warming under 1.5 degrees, these conferences should be our best chances to make meaningful progress. They should prioritize the voice and futures of young people over the interests of an industry that is driving the climate crisis. Instead, the opposite is happening. The people who have been fueling climate change are given VIP access to very discussions that should be shutting down fossil fuels for good. Fossil fuel lobbyists stroll in the red carpets rolled out, while young people who will bear the brunt of the climate impacts are left outside fighting to be heard. The lobbyists will almost certainly outnumber many of the groups calling for real climate solutions, including the youth activists and indigenous voices that need to be at the center of these conversations. I come from a country where fossil fuel exploitation has devastated communities. In Uganda, we have been fighting against the East African crude oil pipeline project, which will release an estimated 34 million metric tons of carbon emissions each year at a full production. This pipeline will slice through ecosystems, uproot communities, and direct harm to livelihoods of people who have done nothing to cause climate change. This is my lived reality, and it is reality of many young people in fossil fuel-affected countries worldwide. Yet, we see stories, our struggles, and our future continually overshadowed by the interest of oil and gas companies. Our presence here is not about money or influence. It's about survival, justice, and protecting our world where future generations can thrive. Youth have the right to a livable planet. We are calling out leaders here at COP29 to listen to us, not fossil fuel executives. We are calling for our voices to be prioritized, for fossil fuel industries to be banned from COP spaces, and the urgency of climate action to be elevated above corporate profits. We are calling for a system where COP decisions are made by those fighting for a sustainable future, not those profiting from a destructive present. We refuse to let COP29 become yet another conference hijacked by fossil fuel industry. To demonstrate real commitment to climate action, we also want to see actionable pathways for a transition away from fossil fuels. This is why we call for an international cooperation today towards a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, which is a legal binding mechanism needed to complement and help implement the Paris Agreement by fostering global collaborations to end fossil fuel extractions, fairly phase out existing fossil fuel production, and ensure an equitable, financed, and well-managed global transition to sustainable energy. The world is watching, and we, the youth, are demanding leaders to act integrity, accountability, and commitment to a safe and just future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patience. And last, we're going to hear from Mohammed Uzrof from the Palestinian Youth Climate Negotiations Team. Mohammed.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, everyone, for your inputs. I wish to start off by talking about my own journey coming here. Navigating the climate process has not been easy, and showing you the truth has always been easy. Showing you the devastation has been easy. And the reason it is so is because our enemy is mutual. We've seen the reports, and we've seen the horrors through the TV. We've seen them live, and yet our silence resumes. Our crisis is global, and our solution remains simple. It comes from us as youth, as indigenous people, and as vulnerable populations. We all come to COP with one goal, and it's just to ask for reparation, for accountability from either fossil fuel lobbyists, from countries and corporations. And I think we all just have to reach acceptance. And until acceptance from us comes through, we won't be able to change the status quo, which continues this lack of balance, this injustice. What I'm asking for is that we all accept the horrors in Gaza, the genocide and the ecocide in Palestine, the wars in Lebanon, Yemen, Sudan, and all over the world that comes from the political engineering of those major oil corporations. From ExxonMobil, Total Energies, Eni, Shell, Chevron, SOCAR, and so on, Israel continues to weaponize such political engineering. UNDP reports have shown us the devastation, the moral dilemma of which we cannot begin to comprehend. How do I begin to reconstruct Gaza? And how do I begin to think about building Gaza back on such a land that has been vilified through the blood of the indignified Palestinians. We need to dignify the Palestinians through such spaces such as COP, a convening which brings the global south and the global north together. There's an essay by Nadra Shalhoub Kevorkian, which came out a few weeks ago, called Ashla. The piece has unsettled a lot of people in Palestine and beyond. Ashla is the Arabic word that refers to scattered body parts and the dismembered flesh and bones of Palestinians, or the human body. Centering Ashla has unsettled the silence. It totalizes the perception of annihilation by insisting on the burial of the dead. It makes meaning out of the loving act of people recollecting their ashla of families, the dismembered bodies of their families. How can we understand Palestine until we understand its people, even as ashla? For ashla begins to reconstitute what Palestinian identity is. It remains a part of the land, and we cannot allow it to become a colonized subject. Of the 20,000 children that have been either annihilated, killed, pulverized, or just simply disappeared in Gaza, Save the Children says that a majority of them belong to two main categories, and they are that they're either buried under the rubble or have been completely pulverized. The situation in Gaza remains unsafe. The Israeli army bulldozers and tanks have internationally pluffed up cemeteries, and if not, have directly just annihilated a whole population and debilitated a society through genocide and ecocide. UND reports have shown us that we cannot rebuild Gaza until 50, 60 years from now. UNEP reports have shown us that the environmental devastation is beyond repair at this point with water, air, as well as water and air pollution, but also just the fact that the very infrastructure has been destroyed beyond repair. For Israel, death is not the end point of the violence. It pursues its victims beyond death. It aims to re-injure and over-injure the Palestinians post-mortem. I ask that we call out major oil corporations like Chevron, ExxonMobil, Total Energies, BP, Shell, and Eni, which combined total around 39 lobbyists here at COP29. We ask to call them out for their genocide and enabling of the genocide of the Palestinians here at COP29. The big polluters here are using COP29 as an opportunity, either to advance their corporate agenda and their political engineering, or to profiteer out of the death of the Palestinians. We must continue to keep the world hooked to this reality, one that we're all dystopianly connected to here at COP29. This convening of the Global South and the Global North brings people from frontline communities who have witnessed the horrors in their own countries and in their own communities, and we must ensure that an alliance is formed at COP29. We must ensure that accountability has been paved through our negotiations, either for climate or peace. I ask that we reset the system as a global community, as an alliance, and not for solidarity, but for action. We must all act together. My main message here as a Palestinian has been to act. I do not need your solidarity. We've reached a maturity point where we understand how severe the situation is. Again, there's no need for us to show you, but rather you can see for yourself. And we need everyone here to be as critical as possible to understand the dilemma and push through themselves. We need polluters out and more people in. We need justice, and we need accountability. We need people to go out there to donate and fundraise, and we need people to study and learn and to take the mic and shout. Not for the Palestinians, but for everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Friends, we are here today, as Mohammed said, not to ask for solidarity with frontline communities, not to ask for solidarity with those who are being murdered at the genocidal hands of countries and corporations that are here in these halls. We are here to demand action, and we are here to call you out. The United States, the European Union, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Chevron, BP, Shell, Eni, Total, we see you, and we will not be silent. Again, for any information about the speakers and their affiliations, as well as